Hey everyone, welcome to this week's release of the Hashrate Happy Hour podcast. On today's show, I'm joined by Sue Ennis, the VP of Corporate Development for Hut 8. Our conversation today covers a variety of topics ranging from how Hut 8 is navigating hodling so much Bitcoin, to how they are growing and expanding during this current bear market, and lastly, how disruptive the AI industry really is and how Hut 8 is positioning itself to be in the path of progress of this new industry. Today's podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, the Texas Blockchain Council, a Bitcoin-first nonprofit industry organization working to make Texas the jurisdiction of choice for Bitcoin mining and blockchain innovation. They will be hosting North America's premier policy conference for Bitcoin and the digital asset ecosystem on November 15th through the 17th in Fort Worth, Texas. For more information, please visit their website at texasblockchaincouncil.org. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Like I said in the introduction, I'm here with Sue Ennis at Hut 8. Sue, welcome to the show.
Hey, thrilled to be here talking about what's going on. Lots in the industry right now. So yeah, let's get into it.
Absolutely. And Sue, this one's kind of a fun show for me. The show is called the Hashrate Happy Hour podcast. I think we'll have to rename this one to the Hashrate Coffee Hour podcast. We're bright and early in the morning. So yeah, this will be great. I'm excited to dive into everything.
That's right.
Yeah. So Sue, what I always like to do for my audience is I like to have the guest kind of do a walk through their background. Doesn't need to be like a starchy resume read, but would love to hear your background, and mostly because I'm so curious how people end up in the Bitcoin mining industry. So would love to hear about your background and ultimately how that led you into this crazy world of Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is actually in the financial services asset management space. I was at Invesco Asset Management in it for until about 2016, selling product to institutions and family office. And it was around then in 2016 that I realized, number one, I was way too young to feel this disenchanted and dead inside at my job. And number two, when I started to learn, and so again, it was sort of that feeling that led me to doing some research as to like, what were some of the technologies that were available that were going to disrupt some of these wildly prehistoric dinosaur technologies that I was watching and experiencing in my day-to-day, trading activity with my clients that was effectively underpinning the Canadian financial system. So this is in 2016. That's when I learned about Bitcoin, learned about the blockchain, learned about decentralized ledgers. And so I left my job, and then I spent about 8 months desperately trying to get someone in the crypto scene here in Canada to hire me on their project. So this was because there was quite a robust crypto community in Toronto. Yeah. Especially at that time, because like Anthony Diorio, one of the co-founders of Ethereum, is from Toronto. So there was a pretty robust sort of grassroots ecosystem here. It took me 8 months, though, for anyone to take me seriously and that I wasn't just another like financial douchebag hopping on the bandwagon. And so my first job was helping start the wealth trading desk at CoinSquare, which is one of Canada's largest exchanges. At that time, it was like 8 people in a basement. We had customers calling us who were like, where can I drop off my bag of cash? Because the only other exchange at that time, at least in Canada, that was well known was Quadriga.
Yep.
The now defunct exchange with the allegedly dead founder. Anyhow, so I got to Hut 8 and Bitcoin mining, though, after being having a major endorphin hangover from a very, very rough bear market, obviously of 2019, middle of 2020. I actually industry altogether, so I'm very bullish on digital assets. But I was really tired of just seeing my portfolio look like crap, and I was at another project and we had lost our funding and blah blah blah. And so I actually had a couple of colleagues who were like, you got to meet this chick, Jamie Leverton, who's taking over Hut 8. And initially I was like, no, forget it. No, not interested, not chatting with her. And then we had a meeting. I did take the meeting. She told me about her vision for the company, because at that time, I think the stock was trading at like 40 cents. It was a very distressed miner. Told me about her vision. I loved her background because she actually came from like IBM, where she has been like Jamie's effectively like the data infrastructure transformation mandate queen. Like she loves getting her hands dirty and like creating and rebuilding and just building companies and transforming projects that, other people have effectively put to pasture. So I joined Head 8 December of 2020, and it was a wild ride. We started doing some really unconventional ways of engaging retail shareholders. Like I was in like Reddit chats and running Twitter
Oh,
spaces.
wow.
And, I like to think of myself as a troll whisperer. And so, and again, a lot of companies do this now, but back then, like that wasn't a thing people were doing. And I was just like, shit, we have such a huge retail following. Our stock's at fucking 40 cents. Like,
Yep.
we got to connect with these people somehow. And then we had an extraordinary bull market. Went back into the bear market, obviously, as like we all did in 2022. But again, we've been really focused on transforming this business, and I'm really excited for the future of Head 8. So yeah, pumped to get into you. That's my origin story. Oh, sorry, there's one thing I forgot to add.
Yeah.
The tipping point for me for Bitcoin. As I said, I left financial services, knowing that I wanted to get into this space in late 2016, early 2017. But the real sort of like brain explosion emoticon moment for me was I went and did this jungle survival course in Amazon Guyana.
Oh, wow.
So it was like me, the special British forces, British Navy special forces officer, two trauma psychologists, and one logistics engineer for Doctors Without Borders. The five of us were like learning how to survive in the jungle for 2 weeks.
Holy shit.
Anyhow, so there's a lot of ways for first world, dumbasses like myself going to the jungle to die. And so we actually had a tribe that lived in the jungle, follow us around and, again, just make sure we didn't step on a bullet ant nest or,
Or eat something wrong. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah. Or, what to do if a snake made a home underneath our tent, that sort of thing. Anyhow, so what was really interesting for me and my tipping point for Bitcoin and its utility was these gentlemen, a lot of them didn't even know their own birth dates. A lot of them had zero identity, like zero formal identity, didn't know when they were born. But their chief had a cell phone and asked to be paid for the group's services in Bitcoin. So that to me was like like just like head exploding, because again, these are people who were not able to participate in the formal financial services economy, right? And yet here was a technology that was providing utility, financial sovereignty, their ability to again participate. And I thought that was like really meaningful. Again, when you think about how there's like 1.8 billion people throughout the world without any formal identification who are effectively, transacting and earning a living on the fringes of society, the way that this technology is able to integrate and empower those marginalized people was really interesting to me. And again, that's when I was like, all right, I got to go ham on this.
Holy shit. So
yeah.
But when the tribe leader asked you to pay him in Bitcoin, at that time, did you know what that was? Or did you look at him like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I knew what that was. And again, leader with the special British forces officer, he knew what it was because they had asked before. I don't believe our leader had any Bitcoin to pay him in. And I think we actually ended up having to pay him in like US dollar bills. But I just remember, again, seeing him suggest this leader suggest this as an option was like really a tipping point for me.
That's hugely impactful. I mean, that touches on like the most foundational aspect of Bitcoin possible. Whereas, for me, my tipping point was I was looking at the comparing Bitcoin mining and commercial multifamily real estate. So your story into this is way more impactful. That, I stumbled into kind of that utilitarian use case for Bitcoin much later on in my Bitcoin rabbit hole journey. That's fantastic. I really appreciate that story. Thank you, Sue.
Yeah.
So I want to get into Hut 8. It's, Hut 8 for me, and I would imagine most of my audiences, is one of those companies that people have watched and kind of ogled over as you guys have survived. And I think you're one of the oldest, institutional sized mining companies out there. Could you maybe walk us through the three main pillars of business? Because you guys have really started to diversify and build out a couple of new verticals. Could you just kind of dive into that for us?
Yeah. So we have our traditional self mining business. But again, one of the major advantages of having a CEO who has such a specialized traditional data infrastructure background like Jamie is that she's able to really look at things differently. Like she's sort of always playing 4D chess in her brain as to how we grow and scale this business. So she's not afraid to take risks and be unconventional. So what do I mean by that is we then started building out a high performance computing traditional data center side of our business in January of 2022. Well, actually, no, I should say we effectively started thinking about how we were going to diversify and capture what we saw really interesting trends and upside in the traditional performance computing industry. In the middle of 2021, we ended up buying these NVIDIA GPUs because we wanted to start training our staff on how to work with different iterations of compute outside of just ASIC machines. So, but anyways, in January 2022, we bought 5 traditional vanilla cloud and co-location data centers here in Canada off of another publicly traded company. And again, the thinking behind there and the thinking, again, especially moving into the next halving is that, and we've already seen another sort of player in the industry do this, and they actually just happened to beat us to the punchline, but is we see a world where tier 0, aka Bitcoin mining, to tier 4 cloud colo compute all lives under the same sort of operator infrastructure. We see a world where, there's really fully enterprise infrastructure as a service companies like Hut 8. So, mining tier 0, dealing with tier 0 forms of compute like Bitcoin, but then also tier 1, 2, 3 cloud, colo, machine learning, AI. Really, at the end of the day, it's all compute. It all needs infrastructure. It all needs servers. It all needs a staff who knows how to toggle and manage all these variations. Because it's really all sort of the same thing. And so we've been building these sort of hybrid data center models and a hybrid data center business since the middle of 2021. Applied is a traditional mining hosting provider that actually also pivoted to the AI and machine learning space. They signed a really sexy deal in the middle of May. And effectively, we've been building out that business for a little bit longer. So we've got some really interesting nuances to our business versus theirs, which happy to get into later. But so that's a really meaningful other piece of our business. We also are one of the only miners, actually one of the first miners to start hanging on to our stack of Bitcoin. So we've got a little over 9,200 Bitcoin right now on our balance sheet. And initially, at least in 2021, what we were doing is we were actually earning income on that coin. So we had about 2,000 that we had lent out, and we were earning like anywhere from 2 to 4%. And I guess just moving forward, our thinking is, we've got another halving cycle coming up in May of 2024. Traditionally, Bitcoin price every halving cycle can move anywhere from 2 to 8 times. So we figure, buy low or, mine low, sell high. I mean, we're not even sure what our sell price would be just yet. But that's another meaningful piece of our business. And then again, as you and I talked offline, we've got a really interesting merger on the horizon with a company called US Bitcoin Corp. And we pick up a really interesting white glove, sort of the WeWork of mining services business. We pick up a software business with that. And we also pick up a traditional hosting business and a ton of power for us to continue to grow out what we think is really exciting on the high performance computing side, which is AI and ML. Sorry, that was a really long answer.
No, that was perfect. Yeah. I want to go all the way back to the data centers that you guys actually acquired and then started bringing that into the fold. And the reason I want to go back to that is you mentioned it. Compute North. They're like a neighbor to me personally. I'm in Minnesota, so I live not 10 minutes from their old headquarters. They coined the term tier zero. I would love to hear a little bit more about that dynamic of operating tier zero through, I'm not sure if your data centers are tier four, but what is the dynamic there? And I ask that because I think the industry, the Bitcoin mining industry, still has kind of this perception of running kind of grungy, shell of old manufacturing plant style operations. Could you maybe touch on how you guys are folding in traditional data centers to digital mining assets?
Yeah. So in Canada right now, our traditional data centers are completely separate from where our mining assets are
Okay.
located. But what we've been doing within those traditional data centers is enabling Web3 customers to use them to toggle between different iterations of compute. We also just had our customer finish their first generative text AI project in our data centers. So, but I think where we see really the worlds like converging is one of the benefits, at least from an infrastructure operator perspective, of AI and machine learning is that it's a lot less latency sensitive than
Yeah.
A traditional high performance cloud and colo user is. And so what that means is there's not as much sort of bells and whistles that are needed other than, cooling in particular is very, very important. And so, but so our perspective is, when you have an operator like Hut that, especially in a post-merger world, has a tremendous amount of access to power, um, understands how to scale infrastructure quickly. So for example, the team at US Bitcoin Corp, they were able to stand up, I believe it was an exahash within 43 days. And then
Oh my gosh.
You bring in Hut's high performance computing expertise. So we understand these chips. We know how fast and how hot they can get. We know how the nuances of how these data centers need to be built. Um, is really where we see sort of these two worlds converging, and also standing up mining infrastructure and then converting it into being able to support AI and ML
Yeah.
is a lot cheaper capex than, let's just say, standing up a traditional data center or being a traditional data center and then trying to sort of cater it to grow the AI side of the business. But then also in our traditional data center business, we do have, I believe it's about like 2/3 of our data centers are full, and we are equipped with very robust cooling systems in our centers in Mississauga and in our centers in Kelowna. As I said, these AI and machine learning training chips need a lot of cooling. That is a very important piece of the operation. So we are already able to, plug some in there and meet that demand. But yeah, moving forward, we think and we believe our expertise, our access to power, our understanding of the space, our proximity to the AI and ML chip supply chain is very unique as well. And again, it's really what we think is going to continue to be a real killer strategy. Moving past the halving, again, given all the growth and demand in AI, and effectively at the end of the day, Hut 8 is a call option on the growth of the AI space, and also if you're bullish on Bitcoin. So that's how we're looking at it.
Yeah. The AI piece, it's just, there's so much about it that's exciting to me. It's almost as exciting as Bitcoin mining. I mean, the dirty little secret about my podcast, I use a lot of AI to actually help with, I work a full-time job. So this is, a way for me to have fun conversations with people like yourself and other industry leaders, and use a lot of AI to help augment the work on the back end. So I see that vertical for you guys being so huge. And like you said, with Jamie and her background in the traditional data center industry, it's a totally different beast. Tier 4, that is, you've got 99.999% uptime, to the cooling component, to the cleanliness. There redundancies. It takes a lot to be able to operate effectively in that space. So I'm very excited to see that continue to become a major pillar in the Hut 8, portfolio.
Yeah, I think another thing though, because as I mentioned earlier, one of our, I guess you could say, pseudo competitors, called Applied, did sign their first very meaningful AI deal in the middle
Hmm.
of May. But one of the things that they actually signaled, I believe it was on their last earnings call, is that they're really focused on building out customer portals so customers can own their order their own equipment, toggle between different iterations of compute, create private environment. It includes billing. And that piece is actually what we have completed and spent the past year building out. And so they signaled that they're just getting started. So those are some of the nuances. And again, why we think we are very well positioned to serve the inbound needs of customer and to serve the tremendous amount of industry that wants to use AI that cannot get access to that compute. Because I think at this point right now, there's only about 5% vacancy rate in data centers in North America. And again, those are data centers that charge SaaS-based model pricing. They don't offer a lot of customizable options. This is where Hut 8 is coming in to serve that niche of customers with the customizable options at the price point and with the additional sort of bells and whistles that they need in order to operate their business efficiently. So again, I think getting those nuances out is a big focus, especially for myself as as one of the faces here of Hut 8,
Yeah.
because it is really meaningful, and our competitors haven't built that yet. So
Yeah, it's very exciting. There's a lot in that's exciting, but it allows teams to, and tell me if I'm thinking about this right. This allows for like a software development team to buy compute from you guys, build, and then bring that to their customers, and they're able to do that in a very customizable way
yeah,
versus, yeah, okay. That's exciting.
yeah,
Very cool. So I want to go back to the Bitcoin mining component for Hut 8. You guys, like, and you mentioned this, you guys are, I think you're the largest company to hodl your Bitcoin, holding your Bitcoin. Um, can you maybe touch on the strategy behind holding that much going into a halving, and then how are you guys navigating that in the past? Because I don't I don't think you guys had any notable sell down of your position coming into this current bear market. So I'd love to hear a little bit on the strategy there, or whatever you can divulge of that strategy, because I find it fascinating.
yeah. So I think being one of the oldest miners in the space, the major benefit is that you already sort of have a lot of the battle wound scars
Yeah.
that a lot of these newer entrants in 2021 didn't have. AKA, we had already survived our first bear market versus there was something like 21 mining companies that came to market in 2021.
Yeah.
And so a
Yep.
lot of these companies had modeled and based projections off of like a bull market demand for Bitcoin and ASICs, et cetera. But we had come out of a bear market. And one of the things that had actually saved us in that first bear market was that we had at that time, I think it was like 2 or 3,000 Bitcoin on our balance sheet. We were able to take out a loan against it, again, to keep the lights on. And so we learned firsthand in the bear market how valuable it was to have this asset class that we could leverage to, stay afloat and not go bankrupt. And then right now, again, I think our thinking is that, if you look at past halving cycles and how Bitcoin has rallied, plus the amount of different businesses that we're able to build, fiat generating businesses, we think that it makes sense to hang on to this asset class. I mean, look, we are strategically selling some of it since January because we're in
Sure.
the middle of a merger. And so, we need to do certain things to keep the lights on. But
Yep.
um, yeah, we do think maintaining a balance of HODL is incredibly important. Number one, because we think this asset class is going to rally in the next halving, and the ability to accumulate more Bitcoin in the next halving is going to become increasingly more difficult. We love the idea of, let's say, when you look at what's happening with the Lightning Network and adoption of the Lightning Network,
Yeah.
and the potential for us to be maybe one of the largest nodes on the Lightning Network and supporting that ecosystem, and then obviously earning additional transaction fees. So we just think that it gives us a lot of flexibility. If there is another sort of major market downturn and we do need to leverage again that tremendous balance to continue to invest in our business, we can also do that. So it's obviously, we do also look at it as a hedge against the failing banking system, not a hedge against inflation, but a hedge against if there are more bank failures. So yeah, I think that's sort of our conviction behind continuing to maintain a percentage of HODL of our production.
Yeah, it's exciting to see. I think it's a value that you bring to your shareholders as well, that they know when they're buying shares of the company that they're also getting a tremendous exposure to Bitcoin.
And I think, just to your point about, sorry to interrupt just really quickly, I think, yes, we are also sort of looked at as a proxy play. So that's why I said earlier, like a call option on the price of Bitcoin, but also a call option on the growth of demand of the AI space. So for example, in Q1, when Bitcoin was up 79%, Hut 8 was rallying 122%, right? And so we usually correct a little bit more to the upside when there are rallies in Bitcoin, which is a great thing. So yeah.
We'll be right back after this message from our sponsor. Support for this episode comes from SunnySide Digital. Are you ready for the next Bitcoin bull run? Get ahead of the game by building out your Bitcoin mining infrastructure now. SunnySide Digital is your one-stop shop for everything Bitcoin mining, from transformers and switchgear to racks and miners. With a white glove approach to understanding your needs, they'll provide you with the hardware you need at the most competitive pricing possible. Say goodbye to your sourcing headaches and say hello to SunnySide Digital. Contact their sales team today at sunnysideinc.ca or via email at sales@sunnysideinc.ca. All right, now back to the show. Absolutely. And I think it's the last point on it is it's a true testament to the strength of your treasury strategy overall as a company, which is exciting to see, because like you said, there were a lot of mining companies that came to the scene 2020, 21, and then we saw a pretty tremendous flush out during the bear market. So it's been fun to watch, exciting to see. You've touched on it a couple of times, but I do want to maybe spend a little bit of time on how you guys are building in this current, because we are in a bear market. I was down in Bitcoin Miami this year. I was a little disappointed. I thought they were going to have a mechanical bear out instead of the mechanical bull, but they did not. Could you maybe touch on how you guys are building and expanding? You talked about the merger, but maybe touch on some of the exciting things that you guys are working on to grow and expand.
Yeah. Well, again, this merger that we're in the middle of doing is incredibly transformative for our business. So it would re-domicile us to the US. We would pick up, I think, immediately in a pro forma post-merger world, it's 825 megawatts of power under management. And that business, again, would have our traditional 5 vanilla data centers. We'd have a self-mining component of about 7 exahash. We have about 220 megawatts of hosted infrastructure, so hosting clients, and then 680 megawatts of infrastructure that is being managed by a piece of our business called Managed Infrastructure Operations. And so that is effectively like, I don't know if this is the right analogy. I'm still sort of workshopping my analogy, but it's like the WeWork of mining services. So WeWork, they would provide like the office maintenance, the suite of services, and just make it very comfortable for customers or for WeWork members to go in and do their work. So that is effectively what this managed infrastructure operations business is. We host the machines, we run our software platform on top of that to help clients achieve increased efficiency. It's really like a white glove mining services offering.
Yeah.
If you look at the amount of non-publicly traded mining infrastructure that's being stood up, in particular in the Middle East, there is quite a bit of demand from sovereigns and other countries that are standing up this infrastructure, where people are coming to us and saying, look, we know that we need to get into this. We know we've got unlimited pockets to spend and cash to spend on ASICs and infrastructure and all of that. But we need people who understand how to get this efficient, keep our operations efficient, and effectively like run these machines. And so this managed infrastructure operations piece of the business is a real strategic um, advantage for us, particularly going into the next halving. Because again, the thinking was, do we continue to try and compete against like the UAE to capture more hash rate, or do we,
Right.
because that's incredibly CapEx intensive, or do we go and partner with them, earn revenue from being their partner, helping them, maintain maximum uptime and efficiency, versus again trying to go toe to toe with people who have unlimited cash, right? And then again,
Yeah.
while we build out this data center strategy and continue to add to our stack, et cetera, et cetera. So that was our thinking, and that's a piece of the business that we think is a major strategic advantage for us.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I know I've said it a couple times. It is going to be very exciting to watch you guys grow. You guys really are going to be a very powerful juggernaut in both spaces, the Bitcoin mining and the data center industries. So it's going to be fun to watch. So Sue, the show, this is kind of a clunky transition, so forgive me, but I'd be remiss if I didn't touch a little bit on the energy side of the equation, Bitcoin mining being such an energy intensive industry. So is the data center industry. Doesn't get quite the same limelight that Bitcoin mining does, but it's no secret that Hydro Quebec and Manitoba have been pretty hostile towards Bitcoin mining. Could you maybe touch on how Hut 8 is navigating that and what you guys are doing kind of in that ecosystem?
Yeah. So right now our operations are in Alberta. And Alberta is a primarily oil and gas province. So our relationships there with local regulators and politicians is very, very friendly. They're very pro business. They're very pro the jobs and the industry that we bring to Alberta. I think, we make a real effort in general to be friends on both sides of the aisle with politicians on both sides of the aisle. And I think we're really focused on education, right? So, luckily we did see Biden's 30% tax on miners not make it into the debt ceiling negotiations, which was bullish for us. That
Yeah.
proposal has been put to pasture. But again, I think making friends on both sides of the aisle and also just really educating. So really educating politicians that all of this FUD and narrative around Bitcoin is terrible for the environment, et cetera. Bitcoin actually produces something like 330 terawatts less than gold miners produce. And yet gold has something like a $13 trillion market cap in place in investors' portfolios. We produce less pollution than air conditioners do in the summer. We're over 50% globally renewables based. And also, I think what's really interesting is how miners are a complement to renewable grids, because one of the things renewable grids is flexible load. That renewable grids need is flexible load, because grids have to be balanced at all time. And one of the problems with renewables is that there's, sort of intermittent demand on grids and also intermittency of things like solar and wind. And so when you have a flexible load operator like a miner who's able to power up if you need more demand on your grid, or power down if there's too much demand, that's an incredible benefit. And so we see ourselves as partners in the transition to renewables in North America and globally. And so educating policymakers on just how important that is. And when you see things like even the CEO of the Texas energy grid, ERCOT, I forget his name, I think it's Brad Jones, he actually came out and formally said, listen, like we are benefiting from having these miners as partners with us in terms of making sure our grid loads are balanced. So again, the education piece is really, really key. We were one of the co-founders of the Bitcoin Mining Council, so lobbying and just bringing more politicians on both sides of the aisle into the data and the facts that exist about how this network is actually also getting cleaner. I believe I forget the latest stats about how sustainable the Bitcoin network is, but it has increased in sustainability. I believe it's by at least 1% year over year, which is unheard of in any other industry. Like if the airlines came out and said, hey, we've increased our sustainability by like 1% for our use of renewables, like they'd be winning Nobel Prizes and like, Purple Hearts or whatever. So yeah, that's how we create and focus on this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Because it all kind of started in Quebec, and then Manitoba was like, well, maybe we should take a look at that. So Alberta has been pretty okay with the mining activity.
Yeah, we
Okay.
have great relationships there.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, the whole hydro thing, I just candidly, I haven't dug in enough to take a look, but hydro produces so much power. It was a little tough for me to believe that they were having challenges and issues. Maybe it's probably a supply problem versus a generation problem for
I agree.
them.
Yeah.
Because all of the dam activity is pretty north in Canada, and then a lot of the major cities are not super close. Yeah. So you touched on curtailment in as a part of that last response. Is curtailment a big part of HUD 8 strategy?
Yeah, so the curtailment dynamics are a little bit different here, at least in Alberta, in the sense that it's effectively an auction, and you can't earn as much from curtailment as, let's say, like some of our competitors have earned being in the Texas market.
Sure.
So, for example, Riot's done a great job, or has really benefited from their demand response programs in Texas. I think, like, I want to say they earned like 10 million bucks at some point last summer in
Oh
energy
shit.
credits just from curtailing during a major heat wave. So the actual curtailment dynamics and technology and sort of relationship to grids here is a little different in Canada. It's not as sort of as much of a moneymaker, but yes, we do curtail. It does provide us, certainly, obviously, with the, benefit of being able to help fortify grids. But in terms of actually, earning us energy credits that we can put towards our total cost per coin, the grid, that those dynamics are much more prevalent in the US. But again, in this post-merger world for HUD 8, we are relocating to the US. We will be in Texas, we'll be in Nebraska, we'll be in New York State. So yeah, we really love the idea of the opportunity to participate more meaningfully in demand response programs.
Yeah. That's I appreciate that. And I mean, it's all a part of the power strategy for the company. If there's not a large need for curtailment, that tends to be signaling from the grid that you're on that they don't need it, because if they needed it, they would have a more robust program for it. They would incentivize you more for it, that sort of thing, which is what you see in Texas, and on the East Coast as well. So you also touched on education, the Bitcoin Mining Council. I also talk with the Texas Blockchain Council quite a bit. What can you maybe touch on, like some of the specific education that you guys are doing to help people understand? Because what I'm finding is it's more just an education problem with
Yeah.
people if they're blasting out clickbaity titles on how Bitcoin's going to consume the world's power and stuff. It's just education problem. Could you maybe touch on some of the other things that you guys are doing within
Yeah,
that?
I mean, we do a lot of work with the media as well, trying to dispel some of this FUD narrative. Our partners at US Bitcoin Corp have been very involved in the Texas working with legislators in Texas on this. So I think that, some of the things I mentioned, it's the lobbying efforts, the education, and adding into every sort of media opportunity we have, really speaking to this this sort of perception and data that shows that we are more partners in the transition to to greater renewable adoption in North America. We also released our annual ESG report, talking about not only the E but also the S and the G here at HUT in terms of our commitment to diversity, etc. But yeah, I think it's really just making sure that we're part of the conversation for a lot of these lobbying and industry efforts to dispel this narrative. HUT is front and center and partnered with those groups.
That's awesome. It's been really fun to watch the collaboration in the industry around the education component, because I really do think it's just getting enough education to the right people, and then you'll start to see less of the clickbaity titles and headlines and things like that. So Sue, just to be mindful of our time here, I think a good way to kind of wrap up the conversation would be, I'd love to hear what the 5-year look at Hut 8 is from now. Like what's the big picture? You've already given us a lot of good insight into where you think, well, not where Hut 8 will be, but could you maybe give us, what does 5, 8, 10 years from now look like at Hut 8?
Yeah, I think honestly, you're going to see us be a major, major player. Again, this is not outlook. I'm not disclosing any formal outlook. I'm just saying philosophically, we are very, very, very bullish on the fact that we're effectively in inning 0 of AI. Like AI is disrupting all industry in the way that, going from sort of the way that mobile internet did is how we're looking at what AI is doing. And we effectively feel like we're in inning 0, and that all of this demand for this very unique, non-latency sensitive compute like AI, it doesn't have a home. And we are going to be able to provide it with the tremendous amount of infrastructure and support that this growing industry is that this growing technology is going to need. So we're very, very, very bullish on that. It would not surprise me to see Hut as being one of the major players. And yeah, so I would say you're definitely going to see. I would say philosophically, 5 years from now, Hut is a major infrastructure provider, and really like an enterprise infrastructure as a service provider, a leading enterprise infrastructure as a service provider that includes all iterations of compute, both traditional and nascent, is where you're going to see us in 5 years.
That's exciting. I'm very, very excited and bullish on that future, and excited to see Hut 8 play a big and major role in that. So Sue, I always like to leave some room at the end to let my guests give a handoff. I want my guests to be able to get in touch with you, Hut 8. So, however you would like to give our guests a way to get in touch with you guys, I'd love for you to give that now.
Yeah. So, I'm at Big Suey, BIGSUEY on Twitter. My DMs are open. Happy to chat anytime. Again, our website is hut8.io, but the best way to reach sort of anyone would be myself over Twitter at Big Suey. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on today. And yeah, really pumped to continue the conversation as you go, as we, continue to chat over this exciting industry.
Awesome. Sue, thank you so much for your time today. This was a phenomenal conversation. Really appreciate it. You brought a lot of good value to the audience as well. And yeah, we'll definitely have more conversation over the years. Thank you.